Hi there, this is a further edition in our series of tutorial videos for Klemi, and today I want to talk through how to make the most of Klemi's Service Manager for putting together the liturgy or the components of a service. If you're a Klemi user, you should be familiar with this screen. It's the Service Manager service grid, and we're going to dive straight into one service. Using the Actions button, I'm going to go to Show Edit Components. That'll give me the following screen here. This screen shows me that service. It shows me the participants, it shows me the information about it, but most importantly it shows me the service's components. For the moment it says the service has no components. Now, a component is any constituent part of a service, so it might be a prayer, it might be an introduction, it might be a song or a hymn, it might be the sermon, it might be the reading. The point of it is that using Klemi, you can build up the service by components, which you can then share with other people on your team so that they know what's going to happen during that service and in what order those things are going to happen. The reason Klemi allows you to do that in components is because most churches recycle a lot of what they use. So we'll recycle a creed, for example. That's a component that will appear in many different services. Or hymns and songs, they are of course always recycled. So instead of having to type out or organize the whole service every time, we've got this Service Manager components functionality, which allows you to put together a service really quickly. Let me show you how that works. There are two options in this particular view for populating the service components. You can either use the quick search up here, or you can use the categories down the bottom. So let's just say we want to start with a hymn. Let's go for Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of Creation. Press return. There it is. Now, just to be clear, that's a component that I created before. It's a hymn I created before, and it was in my components index, and when I searched for it, it appeared, and now I've added it to this particular service. Let's have a confession. I've got a couple of confessions here. I go for the all age confession. There it is. And let's finish with amazing grace. There it is. Okay, if I want just to show you, I could also have drag and drop those components out of these different categories that I've got listed here. So there's a sermon, just pull it across, and then that pops in. Now, just to be clear, those are components that I created beforehand. I didn't guess those out of nowhere. I've got them in my components library and I can slot them in. Now, I want to focus what I'm going to say today specifically about hymns and songs and how we build them. And the reason I want to do that is because one of the really useful things of our components functionality is this little button here. Once you've created a service out of components, you can then create a presentation automatically. So let's have a look at our different components. I'm just going to trim this down a bit because it's just going to make it a little bit simpler for us all. I'm going to get rid of that one. I'm going to get rid of this one. And we've just got these two components here. Now, let me show you how this works. In Klemi, there are every type of element in a service is called a component. We have particular functionality, however, that allows us to put together hymns. That's what Klemi calls them, songs, whatever your choruses, whatever you want to call them. Let me just show you how that works. I'm just going to click on this particular one. So this is how Klemi deals with a hymn. You've got an organization into verses, and you've got a couple of fields here which are really useful. The CCLI allows you to populate that for your CCLI returns, obviously not relevant to this particular hymn because it's so old. The copyright notice and so forth. Performance notes also allows you to write down something which will help your musicians. Let me just show you how that's put together. So here it is. that particular hymn has got one verse, 2 verses here. Now, as we all know, Amazing Grace has more verses than that. So I'm just going to show you how to add a couple of extra verses into that. So you'll see here that we've got verses 1 and 2. Amazing Grace has a couple more at least. So if we click the add button here, we get another space. I'm going to copy in from down here my next verse, and I'm going to get rid of the verse number because Klemi deals with all of that stuff for me. I'm going to make sure this is on a new line for each element, and I'm going to make sure I give it a number. So we've got verse 1, verse 2 and verse 3. Klemi allows me to reorder these for when it actually gets sung. Now, for a simple hymn, doesn't seem a particularly necessary thing to do. Of course, if you've got 4 verses, you sing 1, 2, 3 and 4. But if you've got a chorus, you'd want to repeat the chorus. In some cases, you might put the chorus not between verses 1 and 2, but after verses 1 and 2, and then after verses 3 and 4, or something like that. So Klemi asks you to specify the order in which the hymn is sung, which is the sequence of sections. I'm not going to fill in any of this reference stuff, but I might put the hymn number in here if I had a hymn book or something like that, which helps my service leaders. I'm going to update that, and then I'm going to head back to our service grid and back to the show edit components of this particular service, and you'll be able to see if I click the plus minus here that I've got the text of the hymn coming through there. I've got all 3 verses. Once I'm happy with the organization of the text, and I'm happy with the organization of the components, I can just click on the presentation button, and Klemi will then send off to get this particular service compiled into a PowerPoint file, which can then be used on your church projection software, and that's a really quick way of just suddenly being able to produce slides for your songs. So here we go. There's verse 1, 2 and 3. Great. So those are the key points about putting together components and hymns. But what about, you might say, what about if I'm looking for a hymn that doesn't exist in the catalogue in my library? Obviously, when you're starting out, that's most likely to be the case. Well, you head over here to Hymns, and you click New Hymn, and I suggest that you go for the multiple sections as we just had it before. You can just drop the whole text into a single field, but it doesn't render so nicely. And here you're able to start creating a new hymn. Now again, all the rules that applied before as we were editing a hymn would apply here. So if we, for the sake of argument, decided to add a classic chorus, let's say we're walking in the light of God, we're going to call it, we are walking in the light of God, and or rather we're marching, and we're going to add a section. We are going to take the text, marching in the light of God. That's nice and easy. One verse. Add another one. We are living. Oh, that's God. Make sure I give that a number. Then, as before, I'm going to make sure I organize the sequence of the sections. Verse 1 comes first, verse 2 comes second, and I'm going to create that. There it is. Now if I go back to our service and I start searching it, there it is. Great, so there we have it. That's a quick overview of how to put together components in a service and also how to edit and create hymns, which are one type of component that Klemi uses. I hope this particular functionality is of real use for you as you aim to make the most of Klemi to simplify your service management.